the 10 most memorable crimes in the history of the United States. Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest and most twisted tales from history. Today, we're uncovering some of the most infamous and story-worthy crimes in American history. These chilling cases have shaken the nation and left an indelible mark on our collective memory. From master manipulators to notorious heists, join us as we explore the top 10 crimes that are stranger than fiction. Let's get started. AP's history books are well known for their motivational stories of the courageous actions of militiamen and founding fathers who fought for freedom. In spite of this, there are a few notorious crimes that have caused such a significant amount of upheaval that they are deserving of a place in the National Archives. Listed here are 10 of the most infamous crimes in the history of the United States. The man who won the lottery, but lost it all, 2009, is the 10th of the series. This is not always the case for Abraham Shakespeare, who hails from Florida, yet winning the lotto has the potential to completely transform your life. After winning a jackpot of $30 million on November 15, 2006, Shakespeare, who had previously worked as a day laborer and as a garbage worker, became wealthy. Following his withdrawal of the one-time payment of $17 million, Shakespeare embarked on a famous shopping spree. Beginning with his stepfather, who received $1 million, and his 3 stepsisters, who each received $250,000, were among the early benefactors of his money. However, as circumstance would have it, Shakespeare's fortune also drew the attention of Doris Dee Dee Moore, who had the intention of assisting him in managing his wealth. Shakespeare vanished 2 years after the lottery, and as his family became increasingly anxious, his assailant became more and more agitated as well. Moore falsified a letter that expressed to the family that Shakespeare was doing well in order to calm them down and reassure them that he was doing well. It was only because Moore was unaware of the fact that Shakespeare was illiterate that she was arrested. This was the mistake that led to her being taken into custody. It was claimed to the police that Shakespeare had been murdered on April 6-7, 2009, and in January of 2020, they found his remains on Moore's land. Number 9. The man who committed a murder that appeared to be nearly perfect, 1971. What would you do if you were on the verge of losing all you own because of your debt? Following the murders of his mother, wife, and 3 children in 1971, John List, a resident of New Jersey, vanished for a period of 18 years. Following his imprisonment for his crimes in 1989, John List admitted that he had murdered his family for a variety of reasons, including financial and religious motivations. The murders, according to List, were motivated by a grim financial future and the conviction that his family was drifting from faith. List said that these 2 factors were involved. The family was slain by List in order to guarantee that their souls would be able to reach heaven. In order to avoid being caught by the authorities, John List had pretended to be someone else and even remarried before he was arrested. Only until his tale was exposed on the television show America's Most Wanted was he located and brought to justice. Later on, John List was found guilty and sentenced to serve 5 consecutive terms. He passed away in 2008 when he was 82 years old. Number 8. The largest theft of cash in the history of the United States, 1997. Exists anything that may be compared to a flawless robbery? The Dunbar armored car robbery is the greatest cash robbery in the history of the United States. It was committed by a group of 5 boyhood friends who teamed together to take $18.9 million. It was in the Dunbar, Los Angeles armored car depot where Alan Pace worked that the crime that Pace was responsible for orchestrating took place in the year 1997. Following the timing of surveillance cameras, the group assaulted the guards and then proceeded to plunder the vault using a U-Haul truck as their escape vehicle. The crew would proceed to launder the money through legitimate enterprises, acting as masterminds in the process. Despite this, one of the members, Eugene Hill, made a mistake when he spent money using the cash straps that were originally used. Following the capture and admissions of Hill, the remaining members of the crew were apprehended, put on trial, and condemned. Out of the whole amount of money stolen, only $9 million were ever recovered. Number 7. Guilty until proven innocent, was released in 1931. The history of racial injustice in the United States is extensive, and one crime in history exposes the ugly side of this history. There was a legal struggle that took place in 1931 that involved 9 African-American adolescents from Alabama who were accused of raping 2 white ladies. This case garnered attention from both the national and local audience. When the lads were framed for a racial altercation that occurred on a train, the case that became a milestone involved lynch mobs, a hasty trial, and a jury that was all white. Following their refusal to disembark from the white man's train, the African-American adolescents were subdued and taken into custody. Subsequently, 2 white ladies asserted that they had been sexually assaulted. Despite the fact that one of the women later changed her testimony, the hasty investigation determined that 8 out of 9 of the lads were guilty of rape, and they were all sentenced to death. The case brought to light the racial tensions that exist in the United States, as well as the injustices that are committed against minority groups. After more than 8 decades had passed, the state of Alabama finally acknowledged once and for all that the Scottsboro lads were innocent. Number 6. Smart students that set up the perfect crime, 1924. Are you someone who would commit a crime simply for the joy of it? Teresa Freudenthal Nathan. In order to demonstrate their intelligence, students at the University of Chicago named Leopold Jr. and Richard Albert Loeb attempted to commit the ideal crime they could think of. In order to demonstrate that they were intellectually superior, Leopold and Loeb, who were wealthy and privileged college students, intended to execute the ideal crime. They had the intention of kidnapping and killing a youngster. Once they had identified Loeb's cousin Frank, who was 14 years old, they proceeded to beat him to death and then dispose of his body. The only mistake that was made was that Leopold's glasses fell at the scene, and because they had hinges that were different from those of other glasses, the clue allowed the police to solve the case. As soon as they were taken into custody, they admitted that they had killed the child for the thrill of it. Quite the opposite of being a perfect criminal. Number 5. My Brother's Keeper, Murders in Cedar Falls, 1976. Have you ever considered the possibility that brothers could kill each other in cold blood? There was a series of murders in Cedar Falls that came to be known as the Cain and Abel murders. Jerry Mark was accused of killing his brother and his family on multiple occasions. Following the identification of Mark, the brother, as the primary suspect in the case, which involved the deaths of Leslie Mark, his wife and 2 children, the case garnered the attention of the general public. Eventually, investigations would show that Jerry was the owner of the bullets that were responsible for the deaths of his brother's family, and that he had even lied about them. Despite the fact that Jerry Mark was found guilty of the killings, current DNA evidence has shown that he was not there at the scene of the crime. This presents a new development in the investigation. In 2005, a judge issued an order for a retrial or release. Nevertheless, Jerry is still serving his life sentence because he was unsuccessful in his appeals. Number 4. During the Kansas City Shootout in 1933, Pretty Boy is able to free Nash. In the event that a notorious criminal, mobsters, and law enforcement are brought together, what outcomes occurs? Anarchy. There is little doubt that the Union Station Massacre, which is sometimes referred to as the Kansas City Massacre, is one of the most remarkable gunfights. The infamous bank robber Frank Nash was being escorted back to prison on the day of the massacre, which took place on June 17, 1933. The escort was assaulted by gunmen throughout the course of the atrocity. As a result of the subsequent gunfight, Nash and 4 other law enforcement officers were killed: Charles Arthur, Pretty Boy Floyd, Adam Richetti, and Vernon Miller, 3 of Kansas's most renowned criminals, were among the individuals among the gunmen, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In the year that followed the commission of the crime, Miller and Floyd were both murdered, albeit in very different ways. While this was going on, Richetti was taken into custody and ultimately put to death in prison. J. Edgar Hoover's career was significantly influenced by this key case, despite the fact that this dramatic incident is not as well known as it should be. He served as the primary investigator in charge of the shootings. Number 3, The Serial Killer, a 19-year-old teenager, 1958. Charles Starkweather's murder marathon in Nebraska, which took place between 1958 and 1959, is considered to be one of the most frightening killing sprees in the history of the world. The gloomy story begins when Starkweather, who was just 19 years old at the time, went to pick up his lover, Carol Fugate, who was 13 years old, from her residence. After encountering opposition from Fugate's stepfather and mother, Starkweather shot them both and then proceeded to strangle their daughter, who was 2 years old at the time. It was decided that Starkweather and Fugate would remain at the house for a period of 6 days after the tragedy before escaping. Fugate would later refute this version, asserting that her boyfriend had held her prisoner and that she had been held captive by him. While they were on their way to the residence of a family friend, the 2 individuals murdered him and then hitchhiked off the property with another couple who also came to their deaths. Following the murder of 3 further individuals, they would then engage in a high-speed pursuit with the law enforcement officers, which ultimately resulted in their capture. The death toll from Starkweather was 11 individuals in total, including 2 dogs that belonged to the family. The electric chair was used to put an end to Starkweather's life, while Fugate was freed in the 1970s. Number 2. Who Shot Me? Taking Down an OG, 1996. It was only at the age of 25 that he became one of the most successful artists in the United States of America. He was not only renowned, but also clever. Tupac Shakur met his untimely death in Los Angeles while riding with his buddy and manager, Marion Suge Knight. This tragic turn of events contributed to the tragic outcome of the situation. Following an altercation that occurred following Mike Tyson's fight in 1996, Tupac and Knight drove away, but they were ambushed as their vehicle came to a stop at a red light. As a result of the subsequent events, the vehicle that contained Shakur and Knight was shot 13 times, and the rapper was struck an additional 6 times. Shakur passed away as a result of his wounds 6 days down the road. It is still considered to be one of the most notorious crimes in history, despite the fact that gang rivalries were blamed for the atrocity. Numerous conspiracy theories have been developed as a result of the fact that the shooter or their motivation has never been identified. Some individuals continue to maintain the belief that Shakur is still alive. Number 1. Master Manipulator, Notorious Serial Killer, 1989. Ted Bundy, whose real name was Theodore Robert Bundy, is widely regarded as one of the most notorious serial killers during the history of the United States. It is believed that Bundy, who was a psychology major at the University of Washington, is responsible for the killings of at least 36 women, and it is thought that the number of deaths is even higher. After luring victims with his arsenal of faking injuries, Bundy would then overpower and kidnap his victims. He would do this by pretending to be injured in order to attract his victims. The fact that Bundy was able to wander freely from state to state where he committed murders as he went contributed to his rise to fame and made him a wanted criminal in a number of jurisdictions. After a string of failed escape attempts, Bundy was finally brought to justice in Florida, where he was executed by electrocution after being convicted in 1989. Despite the fact that his narrative continues to shock a great number of people, his larger-than-life persona has made him the topic of a great number of research and publications. And thank you for joining us on this journey through America's most chilling and infamous crimes. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Creepshow for more spine-tingling tales from the dark side of history. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts on these cases or any other crimes you'd like us to cover. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep it creepy.